Hello everyone, I'm Benny Parsons, host of this special highlights edition of NASCAR Video Magazine, brought to you exclusively by Busch Beer, the official beer of NASCAR. This tape features the best of NASCAR Video Magazine, which takes you behind the scenes and to the front row of action in a way not available anywhere else. If you like this sampler tape, there's an 800 number at the end of the program which you can call to find out how to get every issue in this collector's series. Well, let's get to it. And no better place to start than at the beginning, how the sport got started.
On December 14, 1947, at the Streamline Hotel here in Daytona Beach, Florida, 35 men sat at a table and laid the groundwork for a national sanctioning body that would govern the sport of stock car racing. Chairing that meeting on that Sunday afternoon was Big Bill France, who had directed stock car races in the South during that year. In the next 3 days, a set of bylaws, rules, and guidelines were drawn up. Red Bode, a mechanic from Atlanta and one of those attending the meeting, has generally been given credit for naming the organization. And on February 21st, 1948, the National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing was incorporated. France was elected president, and Cannonball Baker of Indianapolis was elected its first national commissioner. France declared the purpose of this association is to unite all stock car racing under one set of rules, to set up a benevolent fund and a national point standing system whereby only one stock car driver will be crowned national champion. The first strictly stock car race in NASCAR history was held on June 19, 1949 at Charlotte Speedway, a 3/4 mile dirt oval in Charlotte, North Carolina. The winner was Jim Roper in a 1949 Lincoln. Race number 2 was held here on the sand of Daytona Beach. A crowd estimated at 5,000 was on hand to watch 28 cars compete. There were 21 cars still running after 160 miles, with Red Byron of Atlanta taking the win in an Oldsmobile number 22. Now, the course was actually a little more than 4 miles long. The cars ran 2 miles up the sand of the beach here, made a hard left-hand turn, and ran 2 miles south on the asphalt of A1A. When did they start these races? Well, it wasn't according to television or even the sanctioning body. They started them according to tides. The tide would have to be out to run the race. In fact, the last race right here on the beach started late in the afternoon, around 3 or 3:30, because of a late afternoon high tide. On February 23, 1958, the final race was held here on this famed beach and road course. Paul Goldsmith won it in a Smoky Unit-prepared Pontiac. Some called it the end of an era for stock cars, and in a way it was. For only a few miles from here, a giant speedway was under construction that would change the face of stock car racing forever. Daytona International Speedway, the World Center of Racing, has hosted more competitive miles than any other facility of its era. The name Daytona is synonymous with motorized competition around the world. This facility has hosted some of the greatest drivers from the world of go-karts, sports cars, motorcycles, and stock cars. The Speedway opened in 1959, and many skeptics wondered about safety and just how competitive the stock cars would be on a 2.5-mile tri-oval. Well, the first Daytona 500 was run on February 22nd, 1959. Safety? There wasn't a single caution flag during that entire 500-mile event. Competition? Well, it took 61 hours and shots from 7 different cameras to finally determine that Lee Petty was the winner. The Daytona 500 is the race that every driver wants to win. Why? It's the richest and most prestigious stock car race in the world.
Oh, I won the Daytona 500! I won the Daytona 500!
Daryl, how long?
Wait. This is the Daytona 500, isn't it? Don't tell me it isn't. Thank God!
The dream that I had when I was down in this fourth corner taking those movies on that station wagon was to someday come here to get in this type of car, come here and win. And so by coming here and winning in '86, completed that cycle that I had as a little boy. And so this is the most important race right here in Daytona. I guess it always has been and always will be.
Coming up later, NASCAR Video will take you to visit with the man who has been here to Victory Lane at Daytona more than any other driver in stock car racing, the King, Richard Petty.
A man who made history in racing is Supertex, A.J. Foyt. And he was the subject of a profile in NASCAR Video Magazine when I had a chance to visit with him at his Houston ranch. A 4-time winner at Indianapolis, he is the only Indy driver to have also run in more than 100 NASCAR stock car races. He first came to NASCAR in 1963 and had competed in 25 consecutive Daytona 500s before injuries sustained in his Indy car kept him out in 1991. He has 7 NASCAR wins, including the 1965 Firecracker 400 and the 1972 Daytona 500. I had a chance to visit with A.J. at his home in Houston and look back at his time spent in a stock car. Was you born to race?
I can't answer that, but it seemed like ever since I've been on this earth, I've wanted to race. You know, I started driving cars when I was about 3 years old. My father, you know, had race cars years back, and I guess it's just something I guess I was born to race.
It's the only thing you really truly ever wanted to do in your life, isn't it?
It's the only thing I've ever wanted to do and still want to do. And even though I know the times is coming to the end, I still want to do it.
In Foyt's early days, he quickly established himself as one of racing's premier open-wheel drivers. Then in 1963, with one Indy 500 victory already under his belt, he added stock car racing to his busy schedule.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I guess I just love the racing and all different types of it. I know it's hard to stay on top at all types of racing, but it was still a challenge, you know. It's still a challenge today. So I felt like if you can win in one car and you can win in another, that just puts another feather in your cap.
AJ, you're the only guy that has ever been successful in all forms of racing. Won Indianapolis 500, won the Daytona 500, won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, Sebring, 24 Hours of Daytona. You know, I just can't imagine how thrilled you must be to have went to all different divisions and not conquered them all, but won all of them.
Well, I guess like you say, it's been something I worked hard for. It wasn't easy like a lot of people thought, but it's something that I'm glad and just had, good Lord willing, that everything fell my way where I was fortunate enough to win each class of the races, because it didn't come like a lot of people thinks, you know, just magic. And I've always felt like you make your own luck on a racetrack, even though a lot of times it looks bad. And like I say, it's very proud to know that a lot of people talk, why haven't you quit, you know, way long time ago? But I enjoy racing. I still think I got a win or two left in me, or I wouldn't be there.
Foyt's 30-plus year career has been relatively safe, but he's had his share of scary moments, like in 1965 at Riverside, when he lost his brakes in turn 11, causing a spectacular crash. He sustained multiple injuries, including a broken back.
What I tried to do, if you look back, we didn't have nothing on the back straightaway. I tried to embed down in 11, you know, it had that big hole in it. I tried to embed the car down in the bottom of that. I think it would have worked good, but as I went to go off the racetrack, it had a dip in the racetrack. And if you look back at the pictures, you can see the car go airborne. Right there when it went airborne, I knew I was in deep trouble. It was out of my hands, and I felt like I'd have run through Junior Johnson, because he was braking in the corner, and I'd have run, you know, clean through him. Impossible. It could have took both our lives. So the way it turned out good, you know. I didn't hurt nobody else but myself. And I told him next time, I was teasing him, I said, next time I might use you for a break down there. But I don't know. If I had the situation, I'd probably do the same thing again.
Foyt has competed with the best drivers in stock car history, from Fireball to Earnhardt. AJ has seen them all. I asked him who he thought was the best.
Actually, you know, I didn't ever really race that much against Fireball, but I remember his name real well. I'd have to say Fred Lorenz, when I was going down there, was really the hot dog down south in the stock car racing. And actually, Junior Johnson. I remember me and him had a hell of a race at Atlanta one time. We was running 2 Chevrolets. I was driving for Smokey Unique, and Junior was driving for himself and running the Chevrolet, and Junior stood on the gas pretty hard down there. I didn't, you know, couldn't run that many stock car races, but I'd have to say he was probably one of the hardest down there to beat when you go down there.
You know, when people mention to me great race car drivers, the first name that pops in my head is A.J. Foyt, because the fact that you've done it in all kinds of race cars. So when people think of A.J. Foyt, what would you like for them to remember all those years as?
Well, I don't know. All the races through the years I went to, when I'd go out on a promotion deal or run a midget or sprint, I like people to realize that I give 100% every time I went out. And that's about it, because you know, when I quit, my days are over with, and just go back to low-key normal life, I guess. And one thing about it, like I said, I've always tried, even when I'd go out and run the midgets, I'd win some of them, lose some of them. But I never went there for appearance money, just collect appearance money and say, well, the car could run there or something. A lot of guys have done that through the years, and that's one thing I made a point to never do.
A.J. Foyt, an amazing competitor. Up next is a report we did on testing for the Super Bowl of stock car racing, the Daytona 500.
Leading up to Daytona Speed Weeks, there are 2 months of intensive testing here at the Speedway. For different teams, there are different goals.
We feel like we need to test about every racetrack prior to the race we're going to, because the tires are different, the temperature of the racetrack's different, because you run in the first part of the year and then the last part. And that makes a big, big difference in how the car reacts to the hot asphalt against the cold asphalt. So we need to test basically every race. If we could do it the way we'd like to, that's what we would do.
Information is recorded, as well as chassis information and some engine variables, parameters, and we come back and analyze that data in order to organize what we think would be a better car than we could otherwise formulate for the different tracks.
We're down here just to try some different stuff. You know, we don't worry too much as far as speed's concerned. We're just down here to go through some different combinations of stuff, and that's it.
No, you're just fine-tuning your race car, you know, whether it be the engine or the handling, you know, and you just try to get the engine to run as fast as you possibly can, and the handling as good as you can, so it'll run the fastest around the racetrack.
We're with Dick Beatty, and Dick, testing at Daytona, testing anywhere for that matter, it's been pretty much unleashed for a number of years, and then in the past few years it looks like we suddenly see NASCAR officials here. How long has it been since you guys started coming to testing?
Well, we started about 4 years ago when we went into the testing the way that it's done today, where all the Fords are here for 3 days, the Buicks, Chevrolets, and so forth. I try to have myself or either one of my employees here to answer any questions, and of course we lay out the templates so that they can put them on their cars to be sure they're right. Our main goal is to have these fellows to come back in February for Speed Week and not have to do any body work.
Now, how about the test session, since NASCAR has limited testing somewhat across the board for all teams through the years, the past year, to try to cut down on expense, which has been applauded by many of the teams. Do you have an official or someone there at each individual test?
No, we, in conjunction with the racetracks, report to Les Richter, and he keeps the scoreboard on the number of tests that they may make. I think it's been very good. It saved a lot of money. And of course, the Monday after the last race, Atlanta, until we open here in February for Speed Week, they can test anywhere they would like to do so.
For some drivers, it's a chance to sharpen skills. For others, it's not that exciting.
The more you run, the more natural it becomes. You know, you pick up little things here and there on the racetrack that help you drive around the racetrack better, and I think you absorb it, and a lot of times you don't even realize what you're picking up. But the more you run, the sharper your reflexes are.
1 lap or 2 laps out here by yourself at 190 is pretty monotonous, pretty boring. Not a whole lot of action goes on at that speed.
The main thing, I guess, is just finding out what will work and what won't, so that we can separate the two. And you know, you don't have enough time to do that when there's a lot of cars here at one time, and this gives us the opportunity to do that. So hopefully you achieve the goals that you're after, but you know, there's certain speeds that you would like to run, but it's not as much that in the test as it's what you want to find out about the chassis and the body and the engine components of the car.
You know, you come in here and you change, you know, make a little change and you run 2 laps, because it's really hard to get the car wound up in the first lap, and you have to run 2 laps. So, you know, sometimes you find a little change you made help, then probably 80% of the time don't help.
For the NASCAR Winston Cup teams, testing is a critical part of their overall racing program.
Attacking the Daytona Trial versus a road course involves different strategies and different technologies, including the transmission. Here's a NASCAR Video Magazine tech report.
Probably the biggest thing that has helped the stock car racers adapt to road racing is the advent of the Jericho transmission. Back in about '86, Bobby Allison was one of the first ones to try it, and then very soon after that, everybody's running the Jericho transmission on the road courses. The reason for it is that there's so many gear selections. You can change the ratios to get off of one turn better or down the straightaway better. And also, it's so much easier for the driver because the gears are straight cut. They don't have any bevel or any synchronizers, so that means the driver really doesn't have to use the clutch. He can drive with this transmission, and he can shift gears anytime he wants without using the clutch. And really, the old-style transmission, the Borg Warner T10 like we have here, is really an old Corvette transmission from the early 60s that was just beefed up, and that's what we used for years on the road courses, but it had these bevel-cut gears with synchronizing rings. So the driver had to use the clutch, and then it was still luck of the draw sometimes if it went into gear or not. There was a lot of missed shifts, a lot of concentration was used by the drivers to get it into the gear that they wanted. With the Jericho, they could just put it in any gear they want. At a track like Sears Point, the drivers can shift as often as 15 times a lap. And when you think about that, in the old days, they really had to concentrate on the shifting. Nowadays, shifting is just a breeze. There's no thought to it at all. They just push the shift lever into the gear that they want. So they can really spend their time thinking about how to get around the track quicker and use the lines that they want.
Each issue of NASCAR Video Magazine features driving tips from my good buddy Darrell Walter. He shows you how to drive like a pro. Here's DW.
Thanks, Benny. You know, a lot of race fans are convinced that having lightning-fast reaction times is the most important part of being a race driver. Sure, there are times on the racetrack, just as there are on the highway, when something unexpected happens and you have to react fast to save your hide. But most of the time, you can avoid having to react fast by anticipating problems. At the speed we're traveling, you have to concentrate on looking far ahead to anticipate trouble. At 180 miles per hour, you're traveling at 265 feet every second. So if you need to slow the car down or change its direction, you need a little bit of notice. This gets harder on a steeply banked oval, especially a track like Bristol, where the track disappears into the top of the windshield. It seems like you're always scrunching down to get a better look at the track ahead by looking up instead of straight ahead. On the highway, it's a little easier job since you don't have to peep through the top inch of the windshield to see where you're going. But many drivers make the mistake of keeping their eyes too low. On a straight section of highway, you can easily see other cars that are 1/4 of a mile ahead if you look for them. Unfortunately, a lot of folks focus their eyes just barely past the hoods of their cars. If you're focusing your attention on the taillights of the car directly in front of you, you have to go to the brakes quickly when you see the brake lights come on, or you're going to close the gap in a blink. Now, if you raise your eyes and look beyond the car directly in front and really stretch your vision to see 5 or 10 cars ahead, you can play a game called Beat the Brake Lights. It goes like this. You should try to drive so much like a pro that the brake lights of the car in front of you never goes on before yours do. The strategy for winning the game is to look so far down the road ahead that you find the reasons for braking before the other drivers around you. If you try, you should easily beat the driver directly in front of you. The more cars in line ahead of you that brake after you do, the better you're anticipating. How do you see that far ahead? After all, there are cars in the way. Well, there are a few tricks. The first is that every car in front of you has a back window and a windshield. And if that driver can see through them, so can you. The trick is only worth about 2 cars ahead before the view gets fuzzy. Another trick is to squeeze over to the left side of your lane a little, seeing the left side taillights of all the cars ahead. As you're driving, keep moving your eyes ahead as far as you can see, then back again towards the cars closest to you, sweeping the traffic front to back. Remember, it's valuable to be able to quickly react to highway situations. But by using the same skills we use on the racetrack, like the skills of anticipation, you can drive smart and drive like a pro. And speaking of pros, let's take a look again at the drivers who placed 10th through 3rd in the NASCAR Video Magazine poll, a group I'm proud to be a part of.
Well, folks, as you can see, there are only 2 spots left, and we'll fill you in and introduce you to those drivers in just a minute. But first, Bob Jenkins takes a look at some of the top drivers of today who didn't make the list, but have a chance to move up in the future.
Well, Benny, you're right. These drivers certainly have made a name for themselves in Winston Cup racing in the past few years, but not quite enough votes to get into the top 10. I think we can expect them to be there, however, in the next few years. The 4 drivers are Bill Elliott. He followed up his $1 million win season in 1985 with a championship in 1988 and has racked up impressive wins on NASCAR superspeedways. He was close to breaking into the list, and with a few more winning seasons, he has a real chance to make it. Rusty Wallace, the 1989 champion and a winner of 18 races in just the past 5 years. His new Penske team seems to be gelling quickly and has the potential to be one of the Winston Cup Series big winners in the seasons to come. Mark Martin came close in his championship quest in the past 2 seasons and certainly has a bright future ahead. But I think he needs to win consistently to start attracting voters in the future. Jeff Bodine, he could be considered a dark horse contender. He does have a Daytona 500 win, and 3rd in the final 1990 point standings was his best ever. But it will take a championship and a few more big wins to help him crack into the top 10.
Thanks, Bob. What about Ernie Irvin, winner of the 1991 Daytona 500? Alan Kawicki, does he have enough time left to make it? Ricky Rudd, who does so well on the road courses. But now it's decision time. Let's hear from a couple of our voters to find out who their choices were.
Richard was consistent for so many years over a period of 3 decades, 60s, 70s, 80s. Smooth, smart, won all those 200 races. So I went with him. It was a very, very tough call because I think that Dale Earnhardt, who was my second choice, has achieved all this success in an era when the sport is much more competitive than it was when Richard was winning. Quite a few of those races were 100-milers on short tracks, and the fields weren't as strong as they consistently are every week round.
I'm picking Richard Petty, mainly because the guy won 200 races, and he's raced for years and decades and continues to race. I think 200 victories is something special, but probably more significant is the 7 Daytona 500s and the 7 driving championships. I don't think you can discount those 2 things.
Okay, who did our panel of top racing journalists pick? Well, coming in second with 4 Winston Cup championships in the past 11 years, and the man who is the most dominant driver in the sport today, Dale Earnhardt, driver of the number 3 GM Goodwrench Chevrolet. What can you say about Dale? His rise to the top since his rookie season of 1979 is nothing short of phenomenal. You name the track, a short track or super speedway, and he's not only won there, he's dominated. We think of him as a hard charger, and he is, but when the race has called for finesse, there's Dale easing through the turns. But make no mistake about it, when it's time to run in front, he's there, particularly about the time Doyle Ford is getting ready to wave that checkered flag. The truth is, 95% of race car drivers are just about alike. But there's that 5% who have something else. And Dale is at the top of that 5%. I don't know what you call it. People have asked me. But I know he's got it. It's something pretty special. Watching Dale Earnhardt drive a stock car, it's a beautiful thing indeed. Dale has a shot to win several more championships before his career is over, and probably pick up that elusive Daytona 500 win as well. Dale Earnhardt will be the first to tell you there's only one king. And as you've probably guessed by now, the man selected as the greatest stock car driver of all time is Richard Petty. On one hand, you can measure his greatness by looking at the record book. It sounds like a broken record. Most career wins, 200, Richard Petty. Most wins in a season, 26 in 1967, Richard Petty. Most consecutive wins, 10 in a row in 1967. Richard Petty. Most wins from the pole in a career, 61, Richard Petty. And the list goes on. 18 consecutive years with at least 1 win, 7 Winston Cup championships, 7 victories at the Daytona 500. Richard Petty. No one even comes close, probably never will. Hey, I thought I knew something about driving until I raced against Richard Petty. Just being on the track with him showed me how much I had to learn before I could even call myself a race car driver. He just flat out blew my mind. But the story of the King's greatness goes beyond what Richard does on the track. It's the man himself. He transcends the sport. Win or lose, he's the same. There's that same big smile and the love he has for the sport and the love he has for the fans. I mean, man, you can feel it. There's no doubt Richard Petty, the greatest stock car driver of all time. Richard Petty, man, he was and still is the greatest. And now a special exclusive report produced for this video on the Busch Grand National Series.
The Busch Grand National Series has a heritage that is nearly as old as NASCAR itself. Originally known as the Late Model Sportsman Division, its early champions were drivers like Mike Claypack, Ralph Earnhardt, and Ned Jarrett. Renee Charlin was a 4-time champion in the early 60s. Other legendary drivers with multiple championships include Red Farmer, Butch Lindley, and Jack Ingram. In 1982, NASCAR redefined the series from drivers competing on regional tracks for national points to a national touring series of approximately 30 races per season. Today, the Busch Grand National Series has attained the status of being the 3rd most prestigious racing series in the country, behind only the Winston Cup Series and Indy cars. While many have used the series as the last stepping stone to a Winston Cup career, others like Tommy Houston, Jimmy Hensley, and Ingram have found a career racing in the Busch Grand National Series is all any driver could wish for. Competition is the key word, with each season producing records for new winners as well as different winners. On many tracks, the Busch Grand National stars have a chance to compete on an equal basis with their Winston Cup counterparts. Chuck Bound, a former Winston West champion, is the defending Busch Grand National champion, earning over $300,000 during the 1990 season. In 1991, the series has had a great mixture of experienced veterans like Bound and Hensley finding victory lane, along with exciting new winners like Kenny Wallace and Bobby Labonte. The Busch Grand National Series is a great place to spend a racing career, or use it as the final step to the Winston Cup Series.
Well, that about wraps up this special edition of NASCAR Video Magazine, brought to you by Busch Beer, the official beer of NASCAR. I love hosting NASCAR Video Magazine, and I hope to see you in future issues. If you'd like to receive every issue in this collector series, all you have to do is call this toll-free number. So long, everyone.